Welcome to the Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet. This podcast focuses on the intersection of sales, leadership, and personal development. Now let's get ready to dig in and crush it. Thanks everyone for tuning in this week. I am super excited to have a special guest with me, Tibor Nagy. He is a former architect turned lifestyle entrepreneur. He is a mindset and performance coach, and he also has his own awesome podcast, which is how we met through Podcasters Paradise. We're both in the same group, and we decided to do a little collaboration, which is very cool. He shares so many tips and tools. He shares books that he loves and quotes. He shares his meditation practice, which is amazing, and I hope it inspires you to start meditating if it's something that you don't normally do. We have a great discussion about mindset, and he shares his background and his journey, which is super important for everyone to listen to. I think there's so many of us that can relate to his journey, and hopefully it inspires you to think about what you want to do with your life and maybe some actions that you might wish to take. So without much more intro, because there's a lot in this podcast, we have a super fun time chatting, and I hope that you all gain some value from it. I'll leave a lot of information in the show notes so you know how to get in touch with him. And as always, if you gain some value from this podcast, I hope you share it with a friend, family member, or coworker, because there's a lot of valuable information in here that can really help you, especially if you're in a corporate job or a sales position, and maybe you need to get a little help and tips on your mindset, because it's super important to have a positive mindset, especially in this day and age. It just can really help you move through your day with ease and help you crush it in sales. Now on to the podcast. Hey, Tibor, how are you?
Hey, Melinda. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, I'm super great. And I am so thankful that you are on the Crush It in Sales podcast this week. We've been chatting and emailing back and forth, and today is finally the day. So thank you.
It's fun. Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Yes, you are my first international guest.
Wow.
And yes. So I think that's really cool. And I've never been to Budapest. So anything that you can share with the audience, I would love for you to share your story in general and your journey. I know you've had quite the journey. So I'm going to kick it off.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to share. And thank you so much for asking. I am located in Budapest. I just moved back from Vienna, from Austria, about a month ago. And I was living abroad for about 4 years. I was living in Germany and I was living in Austria as well. And basically, my journey began about 4 years ago before I moved out. So I studied architecture. I finished my university studies. I have a master's degree in architecture. And I started to work here in Budapest, in Hungary, as an architect, rather in a sales, actually as a sales support engineer, and in a very technical field. So I was working for an international company. The company had different products. We were supposed to sell many of those products in the construction industry. And so I was a technical sales support engineer. So that was a huge shift already compared to what I studied in the university, because that was much more about design and architecture, but I landed in this technical field. And I would say I landed there because it was a decision, but I made a decision based on chasing money. I wanted to earn more. Architects were very much underpaid in Hungary. In general, people are less paid than people in Germany or in well-developed countries, or a little bit more well-developed countries, I would say. So I wanted to earn more money. That was my target. That was my goal. And I started to work for an international company. And when I decided to move out to Germany, I was basically unsatisfied with my salary. So since I spoke German and English, I was always playing with this thought of moving abroad, looking for possibilities, opportunities, working internationally. So I was always driven by this idea of working internationally, working for international companies where I get to get in touch with other people from different countries and being in this international environment. So I would say that was one of my values. Later on, realized that this is something I tend to chase in my life. So what I do today is also incorporates that value. And so I decided to move out to Germany because I wanted to, have a better quality of life, to put it simply. And I was unsatisfied with my salary in Hungary. And after studying and going through university, 6 years, master's degree, and all that stuff, so I was kind of like upset and frustrated because of the situation, and I didn't want to accept it. So I moved out to Germany. I had an opportunity there, and I started to earn the money that I thought I desire, so to speak. And I am just giving back my thoughts at that time, right? So this was my thinking at that time. And when I started to earn the money that I wanted in Germany, somehow this was my turning point. I started to ask bigger, better questions. Nowadays, I say so, and I always tell people that you want to ask, bigger, better questions to open up possibilities and open up bigger visions and intentions for your life. So when I had this security and I was satisfied with the salary that I had in Germany, I started to ask longer term questions and better, bigger questions like, where am I really heading? What is my life all about? Who do I want to become? Where do I want to live? Because when I was a teenager, actually, I was playing with the thought of moving to the US. I've been to the US. Some of my relatives live in the US. And so I was playing with that thought. So I wasn't sure if I chose Germany as a deep desire from inside, but rather as a financial short-term goal, right? And when I reached that short-term goal, basically that concept was broken. And I was looking for something else, something more meaningful. I wasn't really enjoying the job that I had in Germany, so it was very technical. And that is why I mentioned architecture in the university. I really liked that because that sparked my curiosity. Architecture is very much connected to a lot of other fields when it comes to design and all these things. So I was always curious, but in Germany, my job wasn't really fulfilling, or it was just not satisfying for me. And I started to look for new answers, basically. And my idea at that time was, answering these questions, answering these bigger, better questions. I realized, or I figured, that I want to create my own reality, in the sense that I want to start my own business at some point in my life. And maybe more importantly, I wanted to create my own reality, design my life to some extent. I didn't know what coaching was. So somehow these ideas came that, what if I could, just design my life? And I looked ahead, and somehow I saw myself as an old person. And I figured that I don't really want to retire. I want to do something that I can do when I am older as well. So when I'm 60, 70 years old, maybe, writing books, giving speech or something like that, teaching people. So I started to came up with these things. And when I had this idea of creating my own reality and starting my own business, and just a correction. So starting my own business, this idea came from the idea of creating my own reality and reaching my full potential, because I realized that this is the best way to have this freedom and flexibility to become who I, potentially can become, mm-hmm. and not be limited in the corporate environment. Because I felt that I was using my skills to some extent in the corporate environment. It was narrowed down to a specific job that I did, but I felt that I can be more, I can do more, or somehow I felt limited. So that's why I came up with this idea of starting my own business, where I can eventually reach my full potential and create my own reality. And so that's what I started to do. I started to read entrepreneurial books and also personal development books. And when I was reading those books and listening to podcasts and shows, one of my favorite ones was the Impact Theory by Tom Bilyeu. And I stumbled across a lot of great people through that show. For example, Vishen Lakhiani, the founder of Mindvalley, and I have been part of the Mindvalley community since then. It's a global personal development community. Mm-hmm. So I started this journey, right? And I got really interested in the personal development aspect of this journey, creating your own life or starting your own business. Who do you need to become in order to be able to be this person and create this ideal life? So that was my starting point. And after that, I made a commitment to enroll in a coach training program at Ericsson International. It's a Canadian-based international coaching institute. So I took a coach training program. And basically, during that program, I already had this idea during one coaching session to start my own podcast and show in the future. And I saw it as an educational platform. So I wouldn't say it's only coaching. I see it as rather as an educational platform, and I see myself as an educator in the future. So podcasting and speaking are some of the main interests and focuses for the future for me.
Yeah. No, I totally resonate with your story. When I was a buyer for 16 years, I would say to myself, what do I want to be doing? And at that time, before what I'm doing now, that I was going into my second life. I don't know if you've heard that phrase before, like second life.
Sure.
There's actually a podcast called Second Life. And I was the same. I was like, it's nice that I have this paycheck, but I'm working harder, and what can I be doing more? So I wanted to get into sales. So I transitioned. And, it's hard when you take a job for the paycheck, right? You get tied to the paycheck, but then you do realize that there's got to be something more out there. There's got to be something more than just to, deal with what you have every day, which often isn't really fun in the corporate world, and trying to make it work because you're tied to the paycheck. So which is one of the reasons why I started this podcast too, was not only to share tips, but also to communicate, to others that you can make changes, right? You can change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really about the long-term thing that I didn't see myself in the company doing that job in the long run. So I looked at my colleagues, for example, right? 20 years ahead of me, 30 years ahead of me, team manager, whatever. So I didn't see myself doing that thing as a 50-year-old person. So I figured that, I need to somehow find another path, right? So that was my thinking. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are going to be some inconvenient things that you need to accept. For example, when I moved out to Germany, I gave up my company car here in Hungary. I had here an apartment. I have an apartment here. So I gave up all those things in order to explore what could be possible somewhere else or doing something else. And it's the same with the transitioning as well, that there are some inconveniences that you have to accept. And if you're not willing to do that, you won't make the step or do the actions because you're just staying where you are. So that's something I learned because I gave up my life, so to speak, twice. So I had a life before I moved out to Germany, before I moved abroad, and basically then in the transitioning.
Mm-hmm. But if you never take those chances, then you don't know, right? Then you would have been still sitting where you were originally, wondering what you could do, So
yeah.
I think it's important for people to really recognize that. Yeah, we had that. My husband wanted a second boat. So we spent a lot of money, bought a second boat for our business, and it didn't work out. His customers didn't transition to the second boat. We finally sold it last February. But if we wouldn't have taken that chance, right?
Mm.
If we wouldn't have done it, we would still probably talking about getting that second boat someday. So
Yeah, absolutely.
sometimes, yeah, you have to make those changes and those choices and get a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Figure it out for you to go, yeah, this wasn't really what I wanted. So you mentioned books. Like, what other books or quotes have you read and used when you started to work on your mindset and work on your new business mindset horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really love quotes, and one of my favorite is that I also talk about in the introductory pilot of the podcast is from Denzel Washington, and he said, "Don't just aspire to make a living; aspire to make a difference." Mm-hmm. And this is one of the quotes that really motivates me to make a difference every day, and not just aspire to, earn money and be safe and having this security, but also trying to serve others, make a difference. So this is one quote that really resonates. There are many. So, for example, Gandhi said, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." I really love that too, because I'm a huge fan of this concept of being of service to others. Because whatever you do, if it's a product, if it's a service, it's not about you. It's about, it's about your customers. It's about the people who you can serve and bring value to those people. So I think that's really important. And maybe the last one to potential is Nelson Mandela said, "There is no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living." So this speaks to the human potential aspect, that we don't know what we are capable of, so we shouldn't limit ourselves and live in fear, and we shouldn't live a limited life. We just need to explore and have this open mind. So yeah, and some of the books that I read, I started with Robin Sharma. So I can vividly remember I started with Sean Ecker, The Happiness Advantage. So that was one book I read. It's more about positive thinking and positive psychology. There was one book by Vishen Lakhiani. I mentioned him, founder of Mindvalley, and he wrote the book, The Code of the Extraordinary Mind.
Yeah, I read that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that book was huge for me, because he talks about beliefs and what beliefs we can adopt from culture and from society, and we are not even aware of those beliefs. So I'm a huge fan of mindset and belief systems, and I experienced different mindsets in Germany and in Austria and in Hungary. So how people have these habitual thinking patterns, right? And it's also connected to the language to some extent. So I had the chance to observe, German and English and Hungarian, the language itself. And there are some patterns that people use in the language. So, some of those expressions, some of those sentences that people tend to say in certain situations. So that's also connected to the mindset and belief system part. And The Code of the Extraordinary Mind was my first book where I read about belief systems about 3 or 4 years ago. When it comes to mindset, I really like the book by Dr. Carol Dweck, Mindset. So she talks about the difference between having a growth mindset and having a fixed mindset. So a growth mindset, if people have a growth mindset, they tend to think that their traits and their abilities are not fixed, and they can be developed over time and with hard work. So if a person with a growth mindset fails, let's say failed at starting a business or scaling a business or in relationship, whatever it is, Carol Dweck talks about mindset in different areas. So for example, leadership, relationship, entrepreneurship. So, but whenever that person with a growth mindset has this experience failing at something, they believe that they can develop their abilities and they can succeed at the end. So they can go back and try it again, and they will eventually succeed. Whereas the fixed mindset person says that whenever they fail, they think that they failed because of their abilities and their traits are fixed. So they cannot really develop or work on that or something like that. And I was always a growth mindset person. When I read this book, it just opened my eyes, and I think it's really important to have this attitude or mindset that you can develop yourself. And there's one thing that actually backs up this whole idea, which is neuroplasticity, right? So neuroplasticity says that you can basically rewire your brain so that the brain structure, the neural pathways can be changed, or you can basically create new pathways as well. So there is this idea or notion of neurogenesis. So basically you can build new neural pathways, new neural connections, which is the growth mindset. So even if you have abilities right now, it doesn't mean that this is what you have for the rest of your life. So you can develop yourself, develop your mindset, your mind, and basically you can become whoever you want to become. The question is, who do you want to become? So
exactly.
That was my question back then. And so mindset and then code. And one last book is Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. Maybe it's a classic. But in that book, people can read a lot about belief systems. I think it's really interesting if someone is interested in that, how your beliefs shape your reality, basically. So that's a good book as well.
Yeah. Awesome share. Thank you. I'm always taking notes on what books to read. I have stacks and stacks and stacks of books.
Yeah.
And I also listen on Audible. I'm sure you do too. So it's kind of, it's great to find new resources. I'm racking my brain. What's the word? It's either a word or phrase that Vishen uses about the false beliefs. He has
it's
a little catchphrase.
a brule.
Word. Yes,
a brule.
That's it. A brule. Thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not a swear word, So I'm like, is it a swear word? No, it's not a swear word. Like, what's the word? A brule. Yes. Yeah. Can you explain what a brule is? So if anyone's like scratching their head and doesn't know who Vishen in Mind Valley is, they'll
Yeah, absolutely. And I love those guys. I mean, it's such a great community, and it's such a great idea that they created this whole concept. And brule is basically a BS rule, which comes from a belief that comes from society or culture that you accepted basically as a belief because you were born in a certain place, right? So maybe you were born in India, you might have different beliefs about how things work in the world than someone who was born in the US, or you get the gist of it. So the rule is basically a BS rule, a belief that can be questioned. So Vishen talks about this concept of questioning the rules, which is questioning your beliefs, right? And then first step is the awareness part. So what are my beliefs? That's also deconstructed in the book a little bit. So, but brule is basically that, belief.
And that's where I was getting a swear word in my head. It was the BS part.
Yeah.
Part. Yeah. I was like, it's not really a swear word, but it's kind of a swear word. So that's where, yeah. So I wasn't too far off. So thank you. Otherwise I would have probably lost sleep or, had to go Google right away to refresh my memory. So
yeah.
What would you tell somebody if, especially right now we're dealing with a challenging time, but I think this transcends all times, right? What would you tell somebody, maybe some tips on how to change their mindset if they were really struggling, if they weren't in a growth mindset, like Carol Dweck's book talks about? How would you give them some tips to just help them?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about it to some extent, for example, belief systems. So, the first step is really the awareness part. So I usually talk about awareness, intention, and mindset mastery and manifestation. But really the first step is the awareness. So, and when it comes to mindset, I usually focus on beliefs. So it's a little bit more tangible. And because mindset is a thinking pattern, is a habitual thinking pattern that is shaped by your beliefs and attitudes and assumptions that you experienced throughout your life. So this mindset is basically working as a filtering system. Your mindset is a filter really through which you see the world. But a tangible building block of mindset is belief systems. So what are some of my beliefs, right? What are some of the things that I held to be true in certain areas of my life, right? So maybe business, maybe relationship, health, whatever it is. So you can explore different areas. What are some of my possibilities in those areas? What are some of my truth in those areas? Because a belief is, and as Tony Robbins said, is a feeling of certainty, but maybe more importantly, a truth that you accepted based on your past experiences, maybe information, knowledge, or you heard something, watched a movie. So sometimes it's just an interpretation of the external world, right? So you saw something, you heard something, and a lot of our beliefs are coming from childhood. When, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't really want to go deeper into neuroscience, but when you are about 5 or 6 years old, we tend to be, most of the time, the brain tends to be in theta brainwave states, which means that the brain waves are different. So the waking conscious state is the alpha brainwave state. We are in that now, probably. I said alpha. I wanted to say beta. So beta is the waking conscious state. Alpha is a relaxed one, and theta is basically when you get into this deeper relaxed state. So what I'm trying to say with that is, in childhood, when we are in these theta brainwave states, most of the times, information and knowledge that we hear goes right into the subconscious. So some of those beliefs became subconscious beliefs. And that's why awareness is the first step to get aware of those subconscious beliefs. So, some people might work with therapists as well. So I'm not a therapist, but in order to, sometimes get aware of those beliefs, you might want to work with a therapist, and then therapist can help you get into a theta brainwave state, basically hypnosis, and then maybe you can get aware some of the beliefs that are holding you back. And so it's important. Yeah. So it's important to get aware of those beliefs, but you can also analyze simple questions, or you can ask simple questions. And there is one statement I really like, and it comes from the neurological levels, from NLP, from neuro-linguistic programming, because there's this pyramid which shows that identity is the highest level, and below identity there are the beliefs, and then below beliefs there are the actions. And from this pyramid comes the statement, every action is belief driven. So whatever you do, whatever your actions are, they are always driven by some kind of a belief. So, if you believe that money doesn't go on trees, or starting a business is, I don't know, difficult or impossible, or in order to start a business, you need a lot of money, that's some kind of a belief. And from that belief, you're going to have a certain behavior. So you can analyze your behaviors and maybe also ask, what are some of the beliefs that are driving these behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's one way to get aware of beliefs without, getting into hypnosis or working with a therapist. And also in a belief-driven statement, there are two parts normally. Which one is the fact part, and the second one is the belief part. So, to give you an example, let's say I had an experience with this. So my belief-driven statement back then, about three years ago, was I need to have a certificate in order to start my own business. I think that was my statement back then. Uh-huh. And the fact part in this statement is the certificate. So that's a fact. And the belief is I need to have a certificate. So a belief is always starts with I need to, I must, I have to, I should. So whenever you say that, normally it's based on some kind of a belief that you have. Maybe a better example is that let's say it's the evening and I'm telling myself I need to reward myself with a chocolate cake after a hard working day. So the hard working day can be the fact, and then I need to reward myself can be the belief. So I need to reward myself. This part is driven by a belief. And so this way it can be analyzed a little bit. I think that's what I've been doing. And this comes from this notion of every action is belief driven, basically.
But what if you just really like chocolate cake?
Then it's totally okay. And I'm not saying it's, I mean, it's totally. I mean, it's absolutely. I love chocolate cake. So it's.
Now you're making me hungry for chocolate cake, Tibor. I don't know how I feel about that, but no, I love that. I love that statement that every action is belief driven. And if you think about it as you go through your day and you have that intention, think about how much more productive you'd be, how much more you'd be moving forward in your goals and your dreams if you were intentional about it, right? I think that's a really amazing statement. And, I've gotten caught up in the belief fact part before too, like as simple as, I need to have my website built before I get started. That's probably something very common in entrepreneurs. Or I need to launch a podcast in order to get started. You just keep delaying. And if you recognize what your beliefs are or what the facts are, either way you look at it and try to knock it down.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect example. Because in that case, you might have a belief around how to start or how to scale a business, and you figure that you need to do that. But that's based on a belief or an information that you have. So a better check or checking that thing is, or a good way to check that is what is the overall goal? What is the vision that you are going towards, right? So maybe that can help you zoom out, so to speak, and then look at the bigger picture, what you are trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I wanted to ask one more thing before we close, because you've mentioned it in your podcast before, and that is meditation. I think you meditate, right?
Yeah, I do. I have a morning routine and
Any tips, any apps? Do you just listen to music? I just love to share that with the audience just in case they're looking to try it. I'm always amazed at how many people don't meditate, and it's such a great tool, especially if you are dealing with a stressful situation at work, with clients in a corporate environment. It's one of those tools that I wish I knew about when I was in the corporate world. So any tips that you can share with the audience is definitely appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talked about the AIM formula. So we talked about awareness, and setting your intentions would be the I. So before I meditate, I usually set my intentions in my journal. for the week. So, for example, for this week, I came up with the intention of whenever I have some free time, I'm going to do some more editing, episode editings. So that's basically the intention for the week, or focus or priority. And during meditation, which is the manifestation process, I actually use creative visualization. And so it's not a mindfulness meditation process. So I have a two phases meditation process that I actually developed for myself over the years. So I started meditating about 4 years ago, and I started with Vishen's 6-phase meditation, which is quite okay. That's a guided meditation. People can check that out on YouTube. But what I developed for myself is I sit down, I use simple, relaxing music. So it's not a guided meditation, it's just relaxing music. Maybe uplifting, so a little bit inspiring. So not that I, fell asleep or fall asleep. It's a rather inspirational, uplifting kind of music. And the first phase is really being present. So I focus on my breath, and I'm becoming present. And when I'm done with that phase, it's about 5 minutes or so. Then I start visualizing, and I start visualizing things that I put down in the journal. I have some images that I can come up with already because I saw them so many times that, when I start visualizing, I can come up with this image and that image. So I am having already these things in my mind. But the way I actually do it is, let's say I have a quite common picture when I talk about in front of a huge audience on stage. So I imagine 1,000 people in front of me, and I have 2 point of views. So when I imagine myself or envision myself in that scenario, first of all, I see myself from an outer point of view. I'm observing the people, the stage. I see myself from an outer point of view on the stage, speaking, moving, and normally this picture is silent. And when the second phase is I step into the picture and I step into my body and I start to feel the whole experience. And this is when I combine the thought and the feeling. So when I have this, image from an outer point of view, it's normally a thought. And when I step into the picture, it's becoming a feeling. Basically, I'm in the situation, I'm living the experience, which helps me, in the present moment on the neurochemical levels, live or be in that experience. And basically, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it. So another book recommendation for the listeners.
Excellent books.
Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. So he has a very similar meditation process. It's not the same that I do, so it's kind of like a little bit unique. Mm-hmm. I felt that this is something that works for me. I get into this inspired state. I get motivated after the meditation. And that's for me the most important thing, because I want to be able to shift my state. And he talks about state of being. Tony Robbins talks about states. But maybe more importantly, you want to get into this inspired state, and just because you meditated, you can do that, and it's awesome. So that's my intention with this morning routine.
That is amazing, and thank you so much for sharing. That was really cool that you shared all that. I found that when I talk to people about meditation, they think it's going to be overwhelming or take so much time, or, they have to do it a certain way. And what I'm pulling from what you shared that I think is such a great example is make it to what you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Try some different things and figure out what works for you and can get you into that state, that beautiful state of energy.
Yeah.
And everyone's different. We're all different people. We all have different time constraints, different home situations. I travel a lot, so I've learned to be able to meditate on the road. And
Yeah.
I meditate in my car. I talk about that a lot. I don't know if you've heard me say that in any of my podcasts, but I talk about how I meditate in my car, and I do. And I do. I get in this great state in my car, and I don't care if
Yeah.
it's like looking at me. Who cares, right?
Yeah.
You should try it.
Driving or?
Yeah, not when I'm driving though. No, not when I'm driving. But that's what I want people to just understand. Is like, just try it. Take a small step. Figure out some way to try it. I have a Facebook group called Good Vibes, and I've really tried to share that with the group, because most of them don't meditate, and it's just like, just try it. Maybe they'll take some piece of what you do, having the journal with some pictures. I think that's amazing until you get those pictures like firm in your mind. I have my pictures of our dream house in my mind now, right? But I had to look at the magazine for a while to get that picture like firmly placed in my mind.
Wow.
So I think that's just a really great tip. And thank you so much for sharing that. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience? And I definitely want you to share about your podcast and how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned, this picture and everything, and to put it very simple for the listeners, this whole process, belief systems and meditation, it's all about really focusing your thoughts, focusing the thoughts on the things, or focusing on the things that you really want. And there's also one thing that we haven't mentioned, the RAS, the reticular activating system, a part of the brain that is responsible for filtering out information from your external world based on what you focus on the most, because your brain is trying to help you find the information that you need. And so that RAS works based on what your thoughts are most of the time. So if you're thinking about, oh my God, this is going to be, so awful, or I'm not going to succeed in this, or whatever. So those are not the thoughts that you want to have in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. So meditation and all these things that we talked about, it's simply, what are some of the thoughts? What are the thoughts that are going on in your mind on a daily basis, right? So you want to focus on that, and you want to focus on the right thoughts, because those thoughts create your life, basically. And I think Dr. Wayne Dyer said that what you think about expands, right? So that's really simply put, what you think about expands. So whatever you think about, this is going to be your reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And recognizing those. And I think it's important too, and this takes a lot of practice. So I don't want someone who's new to, trying to up-level their mindset, but having a bucket of things to pull from, right? I think that's absolutely so important. So whether you have to start by journaling or have it on a note card, where you can, just reach for it, and you have a thought cross your mind that isn't a thought that you want to have, not a particularly positive thought, let's say. Being able to reach in your bucket to pull out another thought. And that's what the practice is. And it never goes away, right? We always have to be working on that. No one's ever going to be perfect, but you get better with time and practice, as, changing the thoughts quickly, recognizing the thought and changing it quickly. And the more you practice that skill set, the easier it'll become. So I appreciate you mentioning that, because that's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about perfection, really. We are humans, so it's about the progress, and you can really, have this progress, develop your mindset. So that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So how can they get in touch with you and tell about your podcast too?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to go is my website, mindsethorizon.com. So the podcast is available there, and some of my services as well. So in the podcast, I invite coaches, change makers, brain experts, and we very much focus on the things and topics that we talked about today. So I approached this topic from different point of view. So there were people who talked about flow and brainwave states, neuroscience. So I tried to invite people who can provide useful information around how the mind works from a psychological point of view, from a neuroscience point of view, and also entrepreneurs with a conscious awareness who went through difficulties, and they know how to, cultivate an unstoppable mindset and become stronger, basically. So that's the show.
That's awesome. And then you have a 5-minute recap, I think, on Fridays.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, actually, I have 2 interviews. So I started it as a weekly show. Now we have 2 interviews per week on Monday and on Wednesday. And on Friday, I have this 5-minute Mindset Mastery session where I get to talk about some kind of a topic that is connected to mindset or can shift your mindset. And now I'm redefining the content a little bit. So because of the situation that we have with COVID-19, but the 5-minute Mindset Mastery is all about supporting people to have a new insight, new perspective, and empowering them. I think that's the best thing I can do.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative. I'm so glad we did this chat. Now I'm all like fired up for the day. So it's awesome.
So awesome. I'm happy for you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tibor.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. I hope you liked this podcast interview with Tibor Nagy from Mindset Horizon. Please feel free to send me an email at melinda@melindavanfleet.com. You can follow me on Instagram. It's Melinda_Van or on LinkedIn. I will put all of Tibor's information in the show notes so you can reach out. And if you can, I would love a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I do read them and I appreciate the rating and review. So if you happen to be an Apple and can do that really quick, that would be fantastic. So till next time, thanks again for listening, and I hope you crush it in sales.